What are we going to use, our fingers and burn them? Stupid. Can anybody have any questions? If not, I'm going to have to talk, aren't I? People. Good. What? I've got these branches in here. What the branches are. I'm joking. I'm sorry. Okay, one more time. Do you people have any questions from your discussion or from this morning's teachings? We already covered a phenomenal amount of Buddhism. Thank you. What's your question behind? What's your question, Donald?
Well, it's sort of something that came up in the conversation regarding karma and past lives.
Yes.
Well, we come into this world and we have certain tendencies.
That's right, yes.
Are we only equipped with those tendencies, or do we have the whole shebang and those tendencies just are tendencies and we tend
We've got, okay, if we take the Buddha's view that your consciousness is beginningless, I know it sounds hilarious, that if you had countless past lives, and every millisecond your mind is doing something, and every millisecond, therefore, whatever you're doing leaves imprints or programming in your mind, or seeds in your mind. Therefore, we have trillions upon trillions of karmic seeds there. But for this life, just some have ripened. Just some. I mean, clearly your lion karma hasn't ripened. Your dog karma hasn't ripened. You know, all the other tendencies that animals have, which is also the result of karma. So a few tendencies have ripened, some are negative ones and positive ones. Just a bunch, your personality of this life. Just a bunch have risen, have ripened that will be your experience. It's a few of the seeds that are in our mind. If every millisecond our mind is doing something and sowing seeds, there's an awful lot of seeds, aren't there?
Because, there are potentially infinite.
No, but you're talking theoretically, I'm talking practically. There are there are infinite, if your mind is beginningless. Yeah.
Well, whether I accept the fact, whether I agree to the fact
of course, that's another discussion.
That the mind is endless or the consciousness is beginningless or not.
That's right.
That doesn't matter because
Nothing to do
that's
with
how it is.
Yeah, that's what Buddha would say. It's like natural law. Therefore, whether you believe in botany or not doesn't stop botany from doing what it does. Yes. That's right. That's the approach.
Thank you.
You said something about lion and dog.
Yes, that's right.
What was that?
Well, they're sentient beings like you. They're mind possessors. The Buddha would say there are trillions of minds or consciousnesses in the universe, not just this human one, and not just humans. Trillions, countless. Animals, humans, and there are many others.
Spirits.
Well, there are a type of beings called spirits, trillions of them, who are very suffering beings. There are hell beings, there are God beings, all kinds of... They're all mental states, they're all consciousnesses, they're all variations of happiness and suffering, and they're all variations of physicality, subtle or gross, and they're all sentient beings, all playing out their experiences from the past and creating more experiences for the future. This is just the natural law. So we've got trillions, we've been animals countless lives, we've been all these other beings countless lives. All beings have, Buddha would say.
And we would go back to an animal, or you're...
Yeah, well, you have, in order to, I understand, exactly. Well, this is where we get to the fundamental principles of karma, which is what Buddha refers to as a negative action, which is something done with a full action, something done with your body or speech, informed by, and we'll go into this, informed by a delusion, like anger or violence or attachment or one of the negative states of mind. Any action informed by those, that's a negative action that will necessarily ripen as future suffering, including a type of rebirth or a tendency or an experience. Yes. So if we look at then we look at what Buddha would refer to as a positive action or a virtuous action. A complete one would be an action of your body or speech informed by a virtuous state of mind. Kindness, love, generosity, forgiveness. Do you understand? That's called a virtuous action. And there's a million variations of all these. This is a very simplistic explanation. It's highly subtle and nuanced how this law works, Then that would be a positive action, and that will necessarily ripen in the future as a fortunate rebirth and a good experience and a good tendency. Do you understand? This is what he's saying. So then, if we look at a person who's a human being, for example, the karma that ripened to be the cause of being that human. I mean, the Buddhist teachings go into great detail about the death process. It's very great detail. Actually, there's a book that's coming out soon, which I've been working on for many years, editing of Lama Zopa, my main teacher, about how to help your loved ones at the time of death. It was a big deal for Buddhists, you know. So there's this detailed descriptions of the exact death process, according to them, the process of death, what occurs, you know, what goes. It's, again, highly complex, but it's sort of talked through. And then anybody being a Buddhist, you would attempt to try and come to terms with the fact that you're impermanent, that you're going to die, not to be afraid of it, and even be able to learn to meditate throughout your life so that you can die with control, so that you can carry on and get a decent rebirth and keep on moving on your spiritual path. It's a very kind of practical issue, you know. So at the time of death, it seems, according to this explanation, it's even before you stop breathing at the time of death, various things occur that will trigger the karmic seed, that will be the cause of what, when you do leave your body, of your mind finding its way to your mother's human womb. So in our case, we can deduce that not more than a few weeks before our consciousness went into our mummy's womb, our mummy's human womb, which would be at the time of conception, pretty much then. That's when the consciousness goes and joins the egg and sperm, pretty much at the time the egg and sperm first meet. So then, a few weeks before that, not longer than a few weeks, the Buddhist view would say, we were in another type of body. It could have been an animal body, could have been a human body. And at the time of death, before we even stop breathing, the particular, as we're going through the process of death, very strong kind of grasping occurs that triggers the karmic seed. That, in our case, a very powerful, virtuous karmic seed of morality, of non-harming, non-killing, nourished by other virtue. That seed would have ripened because we would have been dying with a fairly peaceful state of mind, because that triggers virtuous karmic seeds, because it's a very natural law, a natural relationship, Buddhist psychology would say, you know, between the mind being virtuous. When the mind is virtuous, it's more peaceful. It's less grasping, less frantic, less fearful. We know that from our experience. When the mind is freaking out, anger, jealousy, all this stuff, or very much fear, this triggers a negative seed because it's a relationship, you know. So that in our case, a very positive karmic seed was triggered that also triggered all the other karmic seeds. This is answer to his question, or the point about his. Also triggered at the same time all the karmic seeds that would be our tendencies, our personality. Also triggered all the karmic seeds that would determine the mother we get and their relationships and the sisters and the brothers and the siblings and the country we're born with, the nice people and ugly people in it. And also would even trigger all the karmic seeds that would cause the type of environment. So all of this is triggered even before we stop breathing in the past life. So by now we're programmed on autopilot, and then eventually you go through the process of death, you stop breathing, and the mind could be there for 2 more days at a more subtle level, according to this system, and then eventually it leaves the body, and then it has this type of intermediate state experience, a bit like a dream state. There's all these detailed descriptions of it. And then eventually when the mummy and in my case, new mummy and daddy hop into bed, boom, I run there, off I go, zap in there at the time of the conception, then the new package called Robina starts. So, if the Buddhist point in general would be to get a human body, the track of karma, there's 4 tracks, remember, the type of rebirth, your tendencies, your experiences and the environment, and there's millions of these seeds, and they're not necessarily related. So, you know, we can use a person like a really example of a naughty person, you know, like Hitler, who is my example. You know, he's a human being, okay? He got a human body. Well, virtuous karmic seed triggered at the time of his past death. But at the same time, all those tendencies of his, those maniac states of mind, all the experiential karma he had in relation to other sentient beings, and all the environmental karma, all of these triggered, and the whole being of Hitler was triggered at that point. So we can deduce logically, if a negative action ripens as suffering, first and foremost, a type of rebirth, and that virtue causes a human birth, we can deduce very logically an extreme person like Hitler. But don't just mention Hitler. If you spend your life not being very conscious, killing the rats, killing the roaches, cheating on your wife, bad-mouthing your next-door neighbour, negativity, in other words, you have a familiarity with negativity, negative tendencies, not being conscious, not looking at your mind, then of course you won't get a human birth. Of course not. Negative karma can only ripen as suffering. To get another decent human rebirth, even a lousy human birth is the result of a lot of virtue ripening. It's very hard to get even a decent human rebirth, Buddha would say. Because the fundamental of this law is negativity produces suffering and positivity produces happiness. And so what is it about a human birth? I mean, I tell you, we don't do much with this human body we've got, this human mind. Look at us, we make a big mess. The human world is a nightmare, Look at the suffering people cause. Look at the suffering they do to each other, the harm they do to each other. Look at the maniacs on this earth, Not to mention even how hard it is. We can see ourselves how hard it is to be kind. We can be kind if everybody's being kind to us. We can be kind if we've got money in the bank and food in the bank and comfort and a nice bed. But as soon as life gets difficult, look how hard it is to be kind. Look at how hard it is to be positive and optimistic and kind and generous. Really difficult, So, we can see life is really difficult. Life is fraught. It's hard to be a decent human being. We can see, to exercise our virtuous states of mind. And many humans can't even access their virtuous states of mind. They live in fear and jealousy and rage and they're junkies. I'm not being depressing here. Just look at the suffering of the human realm, So then, to just be virtuous and try and be kind and moral and non-harming and non-lying and non-killing and non-stealing sounds pretty simple, but oh my goodness, look how difficult, Look how difficult. So to even just get a decent human birth in the Buddhist view is not that easy. So we can delight. We must have practiced bucket loads of virtue in the past life to even get a decent human body, but that's not enough. We've also got to have, the crucial one is to have good tendencies. To have virtuous tendencies. To not want to harm others, to not want to kill, lie, steal. And we can see that's not so easy. Some people are born like that little fisherman example. A good person. His mother said he's a good man with many good tendencies. Very generous, very kind, very loving. But he had a tendency to kill. Now, in the human world, most people don't criticise fishing. Most people don't criticise only human killing. And even then, it's okay to kill if it's a war, we say, or if you're whatever. Interesting. Buddha would suggest it's not cool to kill any sentient being, that no sentient being wants suffering, and that killing harms sentient beings.
So, if your tendencies would be, even without practice, to go toward not doing that,
yes,
would that have been seeds that would have already come up from...
Forgive me, I didn't quite get the point. Please repeat. I'm so sorry. What's your name? Please, may I know your name?
Your tendencies are that you would not want to be someone involved in fishing.
Right.
Or killing anything.
Yes.
Without being engaged in a practice, you intuitively go toward that direction.
Intuitively go towards not fishing.
Not fishing.
That's from past habit of non-killing, like the little boy who's crying with compassion with a lice in his own head. Clearly we can deduce, according to the Buddhist view, he'd strongly practiced non-killing, non-harming, and they would even say practice it probably in the context of keeping very strong vows of morality, defining themselves as a non-harmer, That's why we come into this life. Some people just naturally don't want to kill, don't want to lie. How fortunate. That means we've practiced it in the past, definitely. Without practice now, that's the thing. Absolutely, we've practiced it, definitely. That's what Buddha would say. It's not just good, we can see it. So many of us can see. We don't want to lie, have no wish to lie or steal or kill. It's phenomenal to be this way. It's not just good luck or bad luck. It's because of past practice. We've come into this life with the tendency to be moral and good. We're kind of ahead of the game. It's amazing. Fantastic. How fortunate. So rejoice in your hard past work, Buddha would say. Are we communicating?
We are.
Yeah. And this is the thing about the Buddha's saying, where it's kind of tragic. The fishing... Oh, hang on, somebody had their hand. I'll say it in a minute. But the fishing example, if we just take the view, you get us the Buddhist view. It's not Jesus Christ's view. I was taught as a Catholic. This is a typical view. I'm being rude about it, but just looking. That animals don't have a soul, and God made them particularly for humans, to do what we like with. That's okay, that's a view. Buddha doesn't have it, that's all. Buddha doesn't have that view. He says they're all sentient beings. They've been your mother in the past, they've been human in the past, you've been a dog in the past, you've been a fish. Leave them alone, please. Sentient beings don't like suffering, don't like being harmed. It's kind of an interesting approach. And I think I can see many of us have this intuitively, even if you're not called a Buddhist, you used to be a nice person, Well, the Buddha would say it's because you've practiced this in the past. You've practiced the habit. You've programmed your mind with non-harming. Pretty amazing. And you can see the tragedy, this boy, a really nice person with bucket loads of good karma, good rebirth, good tendencies, good experiences, good environmental, tick all the boxes, amazing. But a tendency to kill fish. Now, imagine if he had a tendency to kill poodles, he would have been in trouble. To sneak around at night, hiding, But no, it was fish, because the world doesn't think fishing's cool. The world doesn't think fishing's, well, at least the Western world doesn't think fishing's so bad, So there he is, killing these sentient beings all the time. And this is the other tragedy. His mother never liked fishing, she told me. She was always sad, you know, didn't want to tell her boy what to do. She was respectful to him. She said he was so, it's like, and this is really what attachment does. You've got the karmic imprint, and then you have attachment, and they go beautifully together, you know. Because when you see the object of your attachment from past habit, the thing you've got a tendency to do, and you meet it again, seemingly randomly, you suddenly met fishing. Well, fishing looked delicious. He was attracted hugely to it. And of course, even though he was harming the fish, he could never see this. This is the trouble. Because when you're full of attachment, and the thing that you're attached to looks gorgeous, gives you good feelings, then all you're preoccupied with the good feelings. And if the world accepts it, then you're okay. But if the world doesn't accept it, you've got to do it in secret. It's unfortunate. And all the dramas of that, and, you know, not being found out and everything when you go around killing your poodles. So there he is with a tendency to kill. The Buddha would suggest that's not just for oneself. It's not. Keep thinking it's not moralistic. It's not meant to be moralistic, naughty person. No, it was one of his many tendencies. He was a nice person. But there he is, going fishing all his life. She said he even called himself Salmon, Sal for short. He's like in love with fishing, fantasized, thought about it all the time. And we all know with attachment, strong attachment, you always want to be with it, have it, see it, do it, touch it. That's what addiction is. You know, we're all addicts, Buddha says. It's just a question of degree and a question of the object, you know. And this is the one about, you're right, nature. Call it nature. Exactly. But nature for the Buddha is just, we created nature. We created these tendencies. So there's this boy. So all the time he would ask his mother to come with him to fish, you know. And she didn't want to. So one time she did go fishing. And she said it was awful, because all she could see was this poor suffering fish. And it was hardly complicated to see it. There they are, these poor little fish. They've got no legs, got no arms. All they can do is flap their little bodies, indicating they're not happy, please. They'd rather be in the water. But even though he was a highly intelligent, kind person, because he was attached to this activity, he couldn't see what was in front of him. He just sees his own fantasy. And this is how we all are, you know. It's because with attachment, to get our own needs fulfilled, even though we're nice people, we can't even see that we're harming others sometimes, you know. He could never see the suffering of the fish. Kind of interesting. We can hear it. Even I remember one time, all these people, the Inuits, I think, or somebody in Alaska, who bash baby seals to death. That's how they do it. For the oil or the skins. I don't know what the culture is, you know. And this man was interviewed on the news, and he was it's almost like crying, because he said how rude all these animal rights people are to criticise his culture. And there he is, bashing baby seals to death. Anybody with half a brain can see baby seals aren't happy. There's blood spurting, they're squealing, they're trying to get away. But because it's the habit, he's born into a culture that does that activity, that considers it appropriate. So he doesn't see it as wrong. This is where I'm coming before, right from the very beginning. Everything in our mind is a viewpoint. And if you're in a culture, that's a very powerful viewpoint, you know. Like, you know, religions, some religions, isn't it? Look, you'd be considered very rude to criticise, say, the Jewish or the Muslim religion of the kosher food. I don't know what the Jewish word is. What the Hebrew word? No, the other one. Thank you, that one. But it's a whole tradition, isn't it, around, because it's based on the food. But it's using animals. I mean, everybody killed animals. Jesus made them for us. You know, Jews say something else. It's just an interesting point, that's all, to look at it. Not being rude, just looking at it. We can see it's all viewpoints. It's philosophy. It's an elaborate viewpoint. And it's then even entrenched more powerfully when it becomes a culture. Oh, this is our culture. Well, what's culture? A bunch of people who think similarly, born in the same place, doing the same thing. Who created it? Those people. You get my point?
A lion eating an antelope in the,
that's right,
in the jungle, is it make a bad?
Even heavier than
so
that.
the lion, I mean,
even heavier. You're born due to killing, strong killing, due to a lot of killing, and which is motivated by strong attachment and therefore strong aggression.
But lion cannot.
Please let me finish. You're such a busy guy, Vasilis. But I like you because I'm the same. I mean, he says mind the same. Busy mind. So there's a sentient being. It's a mind possessor, a consciousness, born as a, so, you know, due to killing karma and the habit of past killing, dies at the time of death. At the time of death, this karma is very strong. Triggers a strong negative killing karmic seed at the time of death that throws his consciousness, what they call it, a throwing karma, into a lion mummy's womb. Then he's born, conjoined with a lion egg and sperm, and then gets this lion body, which is suitable, you know, for that lion mind. Very fierce mind, that mummy lion. Powerful mind, enormous attachment, enormous aggression, enormous strength, enormous single-pointed determination. And she's basically it's addiction. Totally it's the habit, programmed. And you tell her every day that antelope doesn't like having its guts ripped out for breakfast. So forget the baby seal killer who's a human or the fisherman. Because of the habit and the habit and the attachment, these two together, we're like suckers. We're like just driven. We're just pulling from. We're like little puppets, on a string, driven by our habits. So the poor lion, she can't see, and the only way she knows how to get food, rip the guts out of the buffalo, rip the guts out of the antelope. It's the source of incredible pain and suffering to have such compassion. No choice. And she's got all these millions of karmic imprints in her mind, Buddha would say, but virtuous karmic seeds, but they're kind of buried. She can't access them. They're all there. They don't go astray. Everything we ever think and do and say does not go astray. It stays programmed in our mind. So the key thing then is to live a life of conscious virtue, consciously wishing not to harm others, consciously trying to even then... Okay, first level, anyway, that one. So, before we go further.
So how could you karmically not come back as a lion?
Yeah, that's what was
How do you go back to being a lion?
How does the lion?
The lion
How
will
did a
never
lion
come
not
back
end
to
up
human.
being
She's got millions
the
of...
lion for a long run?
Exactly. She's got millions of virtuous karmic seeds in her virtuous karmic seed bank vault, like all of us has. But when she got the lion karma, that kind of kicked over all, and put the virtuous ones in the background, and the doors are locked, and those can't be accessed. As a lion, not possible. But eventually, that karma, those tracks of all those karmic lives will run out. And one day maybe she's born as a nice lady, your dog. And you say mantras in her ear, and sort of she has imprints of virtuous things, and she dies peacefully with you helping her, and that triggers her imprint of a human seed, and she gets born like next life as a human. Not that easy, but not impossible. The Buddha would say we've had countless lives, animal as well, but here we are again, human.
My Guru
Not easy. As a lion, you can't do much.
Yeah, because how are you going
Huh?
to... It's the only way you can...
Of course, that's the only way. That's exactly right, because that's the karmic tendencies. That's the tragedy of samsara. Buddha says we're locked into suffering. We're completely overwhelmed by these suffering tendencies, and then sort of rationalize it and support. This is the suffering of samsara. Buddha would say this is the suffering. Like even as humans, even though we might eat meat, even though many people are vegan, still, I just remember recently. I just looked up. I just Googled. How many creatures are killed by driving? Well, somebody did some calculations. They did some calculations. Just the number of beings smashed onto the number plate. It must be in a year trillions upon trillions of sentient beings, creatures in this case, little baby ones. Sentient beings are slaughtered by the vegans and the vegetarians. So Buddha would say that the whole universe is pervaded by sentient beings. In the air, in the water, in everywhere we go, they're all sentient beings, mind possessors, due to their past karma experiencing this. So just by existing, we're harming others. You can't exist without harming others. All we can do, the Buddhist approach is, at least we can have the wish not to harm, have the pure intention every day not to harm, which programs our mind, that causes... What's your name?
My name? Cleo Maria.
Which is the first part?
Easier, Claire.
Claire. How do you say it again?
In English, it's Claire.
No, say the first one. Say your...
Cleo Maria.
What's the first part?
Cleo. Cleo?
C-L-E-O. C-L-E-O. Cleo Maria.
K-L-I-O.
Okay, thank you. Cleo Maria, I'm very happy. Cleo Maria, thank you. So then Cleo Maria, clearly having these tendencies, she's observing, I presume you're talking about yourself.
Yeah.
How fortunate, Cleo Maria. You've been a good little non-killer in the past, So now...
Things go wrong. And you could be trying not to kill things.
Oh, that's inevitable. We can't help it.
Right.
But this is the one. So let's go into this in more detail now. This is really helpful. Like I mentioned before, the word intention is the actual meaning of the word karma. So we can see that all we can do, given that we're born into these conditions with this father, this daddy, this meaning next door neighbour, the horrible wife, the brother, the world that brings all this stuff to us from left field, who's expecting the suffering, with the creatures around. I mean, it's kind of like it's a minefield, So all we can do is begin to develop the pure intention, the genuine wish to live a life of not harming, against all the odds. At least have the intention. And so this is the meaning of karma. So if you have this every day, okay, the Buddhist teachings are sort of in different traditions taught in different ways. Here I'm describing from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So like the packaging of all the teachings, the practices, you begin at junior school, you go to high school, you keep getting more difficult. So the basic level of practice, which really almost doesn't even seem like spiritual practice. When we think Buddhism, we think meditate. But meditating, what we talked in the beginning, knowing your own mind, being your own therapist, which is really the essence of it. This is more like high school. Before you begin to know your mind, you've got to start first of all controlling your behaviour. Do like your grandma says. Behave nicely. And it's not kidding. It's really quite powerful if we think of the meaning. If we think we've got a mind, consciousness, thoughts, all these thoughts running, instinctive, much of them. And then our body and our speech, like I mentioned before, are basically like the servants of our mind. A little girl, one of my habits was anger. There's no question. Mummy did not have to teach me. I had it down, I promise you. You get my point. So naturally, my body, my speech and my fists would do the job of my anger. There was no kind of delay. I had a feeling, out it came, exploding, you know. So clearly, all of us, to some degree or another, do something with it. We say mean words, maybe we might go around, I may not go around punching and killing, but our mouth is really a harmer, We do so much harm with our mouth, bad-mouthing people, talking bad things behind backs. It all builds up as negative energy, and what is it doing even to yourself, but building up your own anger, your own fears, your own dramas, and we're always going blah, 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 Because there's powerful relationship between our behaviour and our mind. So the job to be done for the Buddha is to be your own therapist. But you've got to first harness the energy of your body and speech. And if we think of this is the simple old-fashioned practice of being a good person, Your mum says it, your dad says it. Don't kill, don't lie, don't say mean things about people. It all sounds kind of cute, but it's really quite profound. Because mind is the problem, negative. But look at the world, it's behaviour that does the harm. It's bodies that do the killing. It's mouths that do the abusing. It comes from the mind. So you can't begin to control your mind, which is the point. Not to mention, first of all, you've got to control the negative energy, the negative tendencies. Then you've got to actually grow the positive, and that's even more advanced. That's more like in the compassion wing. So the very first level is junior school level, Buddha's basic level, basic instruction. A bit like, a good communist would do this, a good Christian, a good Jew, a good Muslim, a good anybody, a good scientist. They would behave nicely. Everybody disagrees about who you kill and who you don't kill. The Buddha would suggest try not to kill anything. They all want to be happy. So don't kill. And don't just think, not killing, I'm a nice person. It's true, it's phenomenal if we have that tendency. But if you consciously decide, you make an intention, I will not kill. So you notice creatures, you're going to avoid killing them. This is incredible, unbelievable practice. Don't think it's not, So the very first level of practice is related to behaviour. And then in the Buddhist view, which is typical in many religions, but don't think of it as religious, it's just a conscious decision, we would then we would make a firm commitment, like a vow, And we all know when you vow to do something, it's much more powerful. It has more power for your mind. You can kind of say, I must lose weight. I must eat less. Well, you never will until you say, I will lose weight. I will eat less. So I will. That's intention. We all know, as soon as you make an intention, a strong determination, that's when you do it. It's not rocket science. It's quite profound, actually. Intention starts everything. So if you have a firm decision, the Buddha has a little list of 10 don'ts as his entry point into what he would suggest are useful ways to become a nice person. His instructions. Not like Jesus, who was God, not like that. Not because he says so. And again, I'd like to talk more about this now. It's a very interesting point in my mind. What actually is ethics and morality? How do we pin it down? How do we define ethical behaviour? Or morality, moral behaviour? Because ethics is about behaviour, not about the mind. So we might all generally agree, a communist, a Christian and a Buddhist, let's say, might come down to a few things. Well, it's good try not to harm beings. Maybe we can get it down to as broad as that. So then you have to ask, why would you do that? So if I'm a Christian, and I remember asking my Jesuit priest friend, what is a sin? I asked him, by definition, what is a sin? And it's a really powerful point. He said, it's going against the will of God. So if we do posit a creator, and we have faith in a creator, that's our decision. then it is correct to say that God made me, the laws of morality, everything, the universe. So then it's correct to say God should be obeyed. And this is what I indicated right at the beginning, so I want to unpack now more. What we tend to think of as morality is a set of rules that someone has imposed upon us. So if, of course, we choose to accept that, then we're relaxed. God's rules, But that is what a sin is by definition, he said. If you do what God said not to do. So naturally with that relationship, you do what God said not to do, you need to ask God to forgive you. This is why forgiveness is a huge concept in our minds. Now the same in the materialist world. I'm living in my mother's house. It's the same laws. Mummy says do that. Why? Because I say so. That's massive, And that's how we tend, I think, to think of morality and ethics. It's some set of rules imposed by the police or the judge or society or somewhere out there. And that's why we get very resentful. Who you think you are telling me what to do? Then we try to get away with it. I think it's very tasty, this. If Mummy's not in the house and she doesn't see me do that naughty thing, oh great, I got away with it. We think this. Well, Buddha thinks this is kind of childish. He says morality is a natural law. It doesn't need to be imposed by anybody. That he says his definition of a negative action is one that harms another. Do some market research in this room. We're going to have 100% agreement. We do not want to be killed, lied to, stolen from, cheated upon, raped, harmed, badmouthed. You check the ants and the dogs, you can indicate they don't like it either. Look at the fish behaviour. It's kind of a fundamental of the universe, and we look at all sentient beings. They all want to be happy and don't want to suffer. It's pretty fundamental, I'd say. So the Buddha takes this as a starting point. Okay, back off. Leave sentient beings alone, please. So what's fascinating here, though, first of all, he would define a negative action as one that harms another, but then his first set of instructions, if a person chooses to be a Buddhist and he is using Buddha as their guide, their mentor, he is not their creator. His suggestions, his little checklist of 10 don'ts to start with, 3 of them are about the body, so he'd suggest don't kill, steal, or, jump on someone else's partner. Control your energy when it comes to relationships, Because we can see the harm done by cheating on each other. So intense in sexual relationships. Then the 4 of speech, which we humans are very good at, Don't say things that aren't true. It just confuses so many people. Don't just rabbit on about nothing, exhausting people. If they don't want to hear what you say, you go blah, blah, blah. Don't don't abuse people with your speech. And don't talk bad things about people behind their backs. I think this is our favourite. We almost think it's a virtue to criticise the politicians, and we can't wait to get home from the work to criticise the colleague to mummy. We can't wait to talk to this sister to criticise that sister. We do so much of the bad-mouthing, and thinking it's normal. So then we think of it as naughty. What do you mean? It's almost we think it's a virtue to say what you feel, But the point that Buddha's got this, which is most interesting, and it's logical, we can see it. He says that a negative action is defined as one that harms another, but why he would recommend we don't do it at the very first level of practice is not because it harms another, is because it harms us. This takes time to see, so let's explain it. I'll try and explain it. In other words, we're used to the idea when someone says don't kill, we're assuming it's because they say that's wrong, which is a typical Christian one, maybe the Jewish one too. It's a set of rules from God. We don't question it. And even though we've given up religion, let's say, we sort of still vaguely think that the world is doing it to us. They say it's wrong. And we say, why is it wrong? We're not really that clear why. But this is the Buddhist approach, which I think is very reasonable. It's a natural law. No one makes it wrong. So let's look at then what it is when, for example, let's say when I kill that mouse in my kitchen, let's say, what is it about that action that causes me, when I do it, to, quote-unquote, create negative karma, which means to pollute my mind with negativity? What is it? Logically, not moralistically. Well, it's interesting. Let's unpack a negative action from the Buddhist perspective. So a classic, complete negative action, and conversely we can say the same about a virtuous action, would be, let's say, the first one has to be, let's say, the mouse business. And remember, Buddha's suggesting it's not cool to kill any sentient being because no one likes to suffer. They're a sentient being, they want to be happy. So the first part that has to be there in place is, in order for any action, negative or positive, to be what they call a complete action, one that would then ripen as a type of rebirth, there has to be 4 things in place when you do it. And again, this is a very simple example, but every single example will be its own, got slightly nuanced and slightly different. So it's the simple principles. The first one is there has to be this object called a living mouse. The object, a living mouse. Second, it's called intention, but it's got kind of 2A, 2B, and 2C. 2B, 2A is I have to recognise a certain part of my mind that's happening every millisecond. There's a kind of an ability, I mentioned it before, that can discriminate between the teapot and that, and the red and the pink and the blue and the white, all the things in the world. We see we're very clear, you know, that's this is this. I've got to be clear in my mind, that's the mouse I'm going to kill. 2B is the thought, intention, I will kill the mouse. That's the meaning of karma, the bare bones thought, I will kill the mouse. But then the crucial piece, which we don't even pay attention to in many of these instinctive habits that we have, like killing the cockroaches, killing the ants, killing the mice, eating food, all the things that are instinctive to us, that we would suggest are instinctive, you know. The crucial piece, to see, is what they call motivation, or what we would say is the reason for killing the mouse. Well, if we analyse it using the Buddhist perspective, there are only ever 3 fundamental reasons for doing any negative action. The first one would be attachment. So if I'm attached to eating mice bodies for lunch, like that's fishing, isn't it? Fishermen don't hate fish, they rather like them. This fisherman, he was a scuba diver, you know, they love fish. So let's say, then I'd go, immediately the difference, you can see the difference, the motivation, this one here, this is the one that plays the major role, that really gives the character to the action that I do. You'll see my point. I'll give some scenarios. So there's a mouse. I can recognise it as the mouse I'm going to kill. There's the intention to kill it. And the reason is either attachment, and mostly for mice it wouldn't be. But the next one is the usual reason we kill the world, forget about attachment, is anger, aversion, disgust, revolting. How dare that mouse be in my kitchen? It's a variation of anger, dislike. Attachment is, oh, isn't it lovely? Aversion is, oh, isn't it disgusting? Anger is a strong expression of that bare bones state of mind. So clearly for the mouse it would be disgusting. There's aversion there, horror, fear, revolting. So then that motivation is so packed into the intention, I will kill the mouse, that we don't even separate them, you know. We don't even notice. It just comes together because the habit is strong. In the case of a person who wishes to kill the mouse.
A mosquito, you don't even kill mosquitoes.
Huh?
You
Who?
don't even kill mosquitoes.
You mean me?
Yeah.
Oh no, I tried. No, my gosh, since I've been a Buddhist, of course not. Never consciously killed a living thing since I've been a Buddhist. No. This is like a fundamental one. Trying not to. Yeah, absolutely, of course. So anyway, this mouse, the third reason, this sounds very funny, but listen to it, and this is Buddha would suggest, okay, this would be ignorance. Buddha would suggest that, for example, using the Jewish example, no, not that one. Yeah, no, I don't know about enough of the rules, I can't say it. But let's say, well, the Christian one, all of those ones, the religious teachings, that it's okay to kill an animal for food, for example. Or even the Christian teaching, for example. And by the way, Buddha says it's good to talk about these things. He's not being fundamentalist, you know. Got to have equal, very open mind about to analyse these things. I would never criticise a person who does it. Ever. I would never dare criticise a person who does these things. I'm discussing philosophical approaches, okay? So the Buddha would suggest philosophically that it is simply ignorant. It's wrong view. It's a wrong view to suggest that a creator makes creatures and it's okay to kill them for food. He would suggest that's ignorance. So there's either ignorance, or like some religions, kill and sacrifice it and give it to God, you know, that kind of thing. Buddha would suggest that's an ignorant reason. It's wrong, it's not correct. Or the other one is aversion, or the other one is attachment. They're the main 3 reasons, variations of these. So in the case of the mouse, simple, there it is, I've got aversion to the mouse, how disgusting, I will kill the mouse. The third part of these 4 things, the first is the object is there, then there's the second part, you know, the 2A, B and C, they're all in place, and the motivation is anger, which is the strongest one. The third one is I do the action, and the fourth one is it dies. That's a complete action of killing. So now let's just say Clea Maria has a mouse in her kitchen.
I do.
Okay.
I thought about this a lot.
There you go. So Clear Maria has a mouse, but she doesn't have aversion to the mouse. She doesn't want to kill the mouse.
I don't.
That's right. I can see that.
I have a real problem with this.
Okay, let's keep talking. So Clear Maria, but let's use it. No, okay. So we'll discuss your scenario in a minute, but I'm going to use another scenario here for a different example. Okay, so forget yours. So don't confuse it. I want to use Clear Maria as an example. Let's just pretend. Let's say Paros has a mouse in his kitchen, and he's really compassionate, and he sees the mouse is suffering, and he has such compassion. And like a lot of people on this earth, he thinks if I kill the mouse, it'll stop its suffering. That's not Clear Maria's example, so we don't worry about hers. In a second, we'll discuss it. So let's say Paros, and this is a very common thing about our grandmas, or the mice, or the dog, the pet. I mean, poor veterinarians these days spend half their time killing, you know. We use these polite words for it. Putting them down, putting them to sleep, euthanizing them. It's called killing, okay? It's called stopping its life. But obviously our motivation, it's clearly different, isn't it? It's completely obviously different. Your reason is because you've got such compassion for this mouse and you immediately can't stand the pain and you think this poor mouse, if I kill it, I will stop its suffering. That's a very typical view, is it not? Because the usual...
Happens in hospitals too.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, with humans you mean?
Yeah.
No, I believe you. I believe. Let me finish the scenario first. Let me finish the scenarios and you'll get the point I'm trying to make and then we can open this up for discussion. So what I'm getting at here is answering the question, what is it when a person kills, let's say, that makes it negative for that person? What is it that causes that person to pollute their own mind and leave a seed of negativity in their mind that will ripen in the future as their suffering rebirth, their tendency to keep killing, or the experience of being killed, which is one of the results of killing? I'll go into these in more detail. So not just, killing is wrong because somebody says. No, this is trying to see it logically, you know. The reason is this motivation. So there's Paros. The first one is there. There's a living mouse. Number 2A is there. It's called, there's the mouse I'm going to kill. 2B is there, I will kill the mouse. 2C is there, but instead of anger, his motivation is compassion. It's a possibility, we can hear this. I can also see something will kill, but anybody who pretends it's compassion, but it's really aversion, we're not talking about pretend. But we all know there can be a person who can have genuine compassion, truly sees the suffering, truly wants to stop the suffering, and believes that killing it will end the suffering. So let's say Paros is that one. So all the 2A, B, and C are there, but the C is different. His motivation is compassion. Mine was the wish to harm the mouse. This is the one that makes the entire difference. That's the one. His mind is pervaded by compassion. He wants to help it. The third step is he does it. The fourth step is the mouse dies. My scenario, just the same, but that one piece is different. I want to harm the mouse. That's what makes the action different, karmically. So even though the Buddha, I'm going to go into this now, the Buddha would suggest that, as the Dalai Lama often says, compassion is not enough. You need wisdom. So what's the wisdom you need here? This is like a joke for us. We don't think it's possible. But the wisdom that you need for Paros to not only have compassion and wish to harm the mouse not suffer, but if he does plan to kill it, you could argue the wisdom he needs is clairvoyance. He needs to see the mouse's mind, he needs to know the karma of the mouse, and he needs to be confident that when he kills it, virtuous karma will ripen in the mouse's mind that will throw it into a nice human rebirth, and he'll meet the Dalai Lama and become a good little Buddhist or something. I'm just talking, you know. So who's got that kind of wisdom? Nobody. So back off, Buddha says. Don't kill it. Don't kill it. The reason, Clear Marie, is very simple. For the mouse's sake, it might even be helpful. You don't know that, but we don't have that wisdom. So therefore, the first reason not to kill for the Buddha is for our own sake. Because first, we can argue that Paros' mouse, it died, let's say it died really freaked out. It's already suffering, and he comes and jumps on it and kills it. The poor little mind has gone berserk, his little ego has gone frantic, he's completely full of fear. So if you die with really powerful fear, your consciousness can only take a suffering rebirth. So he threw the fish, the mouse from the frying pan to the fire. Worse. He even made its suffering worse. Can you hear the view I'm talking here? Yes. Don't believe a single word I'm telling you. I'm just telling you the Buddha's view. So you can't be certain that the mouse's suffering, will stop, but every sentient being will take another life, Buddha says, with a guarantee that's natural. So if it dies with a lot of fear and panic, this pretty much guarantees it will get even a worse suffering rebirth. For the mouse's sake, best not to kill. But for your sake, if you don't want a mouse in your kitchen, there's lots of things we can do. We know that, to be able to remove the mouse without harming it, you know. So what's your reason, what's your scenario, Clea Maria, with your little mouse? What's your scenario? What, darling?
I have many mice.
Oh, sweetheart. So they're kind of making
I
a mess.
have the door open because there are many dogs.
Yeah.
So many animals.
Come in.
I have a whole environmental habitat. And I
Right.
have
Clever,
meditated.
because you have compassion for these creatures and you like having them around.
Right. And so
Sweetheart.
part of what's important in your talk is fundamentally you should always be looking for a paradigm shift in your thinking
That's right.
about how to solve
Yeah.
the problem.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
So I don't want to hurt the mice.
That's right.
I want to figure out a way to have the mice maybe go live elsewhere.
Exactly. That's
So I've thought many ways of how we could do
Good.
that.
Then
I
do
haven't figured out how we're going to do
But
that.
lots of people do this now.
I would imagine at every Buddhist monastery they might have this issue and have solved it.
Well, no, I mean, sometimes the Tibetans they just put up with them. They just live with the mice. They live with the mice, they live with the flea. I mean, they try to do their best. They certainly will not kill them. And many people I know who are born in the West and cleaner houses, you know, will do all sorts of things with the intention not to harm, will find traps that trap them but don't harm them. And, you know, we have to then recognise what is the condition that mice like and try and not provide the condition for them. But, I mean, it's very hard, no matter how hard we try. Even if we do kill them every day, they're still going to keep coming back, maybe. So it's not that easy one. It's very interesting that you have this attitude.
So I want to ask a question that I think is philosophically appropriate.
Uh-huh.
In your choices of what you do,
Yes.
one choice would be to create conditions that would suggest to whatever is harming you or a risk so you wouldn't have to be a killer.
That's right.
To
Precisely.
kind of suggest to whatever creature or
Yes.
person or being it
Yes.
is to step away,
That's right.
step off.
Yes.
And you would have to be creative and inventive. about
Yes,
figuring out
precisely.
how to do
Maria.
it.
I mean, Claire Marie, you're talking like a Buddhist. Precisely. It's exactly how what informs a Buddhist, a person who's got this view, informs their thinking. Or even a person who's not a Buddhist. You're sounding like that without the label being Buddhist. In other words, the starting point for the Buddhist one, if you want to summarise one action, if you want to put it in one sentence, how to live your life, the Buddha would say, try not to kill. That's the main one. Because everything comes from this. If you have this wish not to harm, then everything flows from this. The appreciating creatures, having respect for others. It implies respect for the environment. It implies respect for humans. It brings patience and kindness. It's like everything starts from this, you know. One little summary. Try not to harm. Try not to kill. Try not to harm. Try not to kill. So yeah, it's sometimes impossible to provide the condition. But there's all sort of interesting approaches too, because the Buddhist view about karma is that, you know, every sentient being we meet, the hubby, the wife, the kids, the neighbours, the terrorist down the road, whatever scenario you're born into, we've got personal history with those sentient beings. So let's say you're born in a war zone. That's due to some negative karma where you're surrounded by heavy-duty dudes, lots of fear and paranoia. You're born in a peaceful environment with sweet people. None of this is accidental. Like you're born as an Inuit that slaughters, you know, baby seals. So that's due to karma as well. So every sentient being we meet, we've got some history with them. Those mice, those rats, those humans, whatever it is, we've got some personal history. Like, they're your rats, they're your dogs, they're your mice. They're not in my house, you know. You've got some karma with them. So then the idea would be you've got some karma with them, therefore you've got some past history. Therefore, they're doing to you whatever you've done to them. So if they're eating your house and cacaing in your drawers, you know, okay, we're paying a karmic debt here, but still try to do our best not to harm and change the conditions. It's true. But the interesting point also, which we'll go into later, there's a practice we do every day. We call it purification. Based upon the view that we've got these millions of karmic imprints that inform us and inform our tendencies, inform our actions, inform our experiences, you know, then we are trying to also change all that by vowing not to kill, lie, steal, trying to go to high school and trying to work on our minds to stop the delusions which inform the behaviour, and then eventually go to the compassion when we even now benefit others. But we have this practice every day where we call it purification, where you regret the harm you've done because you don't want suffering yourself for the future, and then you have compassion for those you've harmed. Then you do some kind of practice to purify, and then you make a decision not to do again. And all those also purify the ways that karma ripens. So if we regret every day, let's say there's the mice, you know, they make a mess. They shit in our drawers and things, don't they? They make the house dirty, right? Leave their caca behind. Yeah? Okay, so we've obviously offended them in the past, dirtied their environment, so that if you have powerful, Buddhists would say this, it sounds so cute and cosmic, you know. If you strongly have regret for whatever harm you did to these creatures in the past, and then you really regret that because you don't want this suffering, because this is the fruit of your own past action, then you have compassion for them, and then you purify, and then you vow not to do again. Don't be surprised they go away.
I considered something like this,
There you go.
actually.
Many people think this way.
I considered that this was the way to go.
Many people think this way. Yes, sweetheart. Yes.
I wanted to ask you, I mean, if you are a human being, we can say that you kill from ignorance or, I don't know, anger? Or,
Yes, yes.
can we say that survival, our desire to survive sometimes can make us kill?
This is the world, I think. This is how animals
I mean,
live.
if you have been born in India, it's very easy, no, it's not very easy, but it's possible to think that you can survive without killing. If you have been born in Alaska, I don't think that it's possible to imagine even that.
I understand. So I understand. And this is the tragedy, Buddha would say, of samsara. That we, by killing in the past, we create the cause to be born in an environment where we continue to kill. So it's like due to past killing, you're born as a lion who has no choice but to kill. That's the tragedy. That's the suffering of samsara, Buddha says, to have such compassion. And that's why it's so fortunate if we can think about these things and make some decisions to change. This is what's so marvellous, you know. But we can see our environments really do determine so many of our choices, and that's what's making it so suffering, you know. If we can have the courage to know we don't have to be informed by the environment, that we have the power to change our minds. That's what's amazing, isn't it? To think about it. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
I have two questions. Since we're into killing and what happens in the soul, what about suicide and abortion?
I understand, darling. Yeah, exactly. So suicide, exactly the same thing. Let's analyse it as one of these things. First of all, there's the object to kill, which is yourself. It's not the same type of negative karma. It's a different one. It would be negative. Okay, let's see if it's negative. Let's look at it. Let's analyse it, okay? So then you have the intention. And there's 2A, which is you've got to kill yourself. You recognise you've got to kill yourself. But then the 2B is I will kill myself, the intention. But 2C is what's my motivation. So I think with respect to most people who have this wish to kill themselves, we analyse it. It's not out of love. It's not out of being blissful. It's not out of being compassionate. It could be compassion. You can imagine if you're old and you really see all your family spending all this money and you have real compassion, you could imagine it's possible to kill yourself with compassion. But normally what we call suicide is usually out of suffering and despair, isn't it? Wouldn't you agree? So that's when the mind is suffering, when the mind is negative, when the mind is fearful, that's the nature of ego. It's the suffering of ego when there's so much fear. This can only trigger, mostly can only trigger a negative karmic seed, which will not bring a happy result.
It's not because in some, whether it's Christianity or whatever, is that the soul is trapped in
No, they don't talk like that in Buddhism. It would probably just, depending on the way you died and how, whether it was really strong anger or despair or whatever the reason was.
Then it's the level of when
It
you're
would,
born
yeah,
again.
that's right. It would take a certain type of rebirth. Could be animal, could be spirit. Especially, there's all kinds of rebirths. I'll talk about these later. But the abortion for the Buddha is very clear. This is my own experience. I'm trying not to give too much information in my private life, but I found it a very helpful experience. When I was an old hippie living in London in the 60s, I was always whatever I had as my philosophy, I was very serious. So hippies, sleep around, and I slept around. Actually, I joke now, I'm still sleeping around, because I travel a lot. I sleep in about 60 beds a year, so I joke and I say I'm sleeping around. But back then, I remember vividly this particular occasion, this Australian boyfriend in London. I'm sorry to be so much information, but this is my point. I remember the second we were doing whatever we did, I knew that second, I didn't think these things at all, that second I knew I was pregnant. I didn't know the words even, but it was vivid experience that the moment we had sex, that second, something went into me. I knew that second, a being, I didn't know the words, a consciousness went into me. It was very clear. That's usually the Buddhist view, that that's when you have sex and the egg and sperm meet. That's what causes the egg and sperm to stay together, is the entry of a consciousness. So that from that second, it's a human being. so clear for the Buddha. Abortion is called killing a human being. Obviously, it can't be as negative as killing a 3-year-old baby because it's already got more conceptuality, it's got more experiences, more feelings, so it will suffer more, won't it? But still technically a human being.
What happens to its soul as well?
Well, they don't use the word soul, as I suggested. They use the word consciousness, subtle consciousness. Okay, let's look at this then. So there's the 4 ways that karma ripens. So in the terms of killing, in my case, abortion, for example, or the mouse, either way. First of all, so let's think of the fetus. It's a sentient being with whom I had very strong karma. You've got to have very powerful history with a consciousness for it when it's died to find its way to your womb. It's not kind of random. I remember reading one Tibetan Lama said, this sounds hilarious, you know. He said, at the time of a male and female human beings having sex, billions of consciousnesses, souls, whatever you want to call consciousnesses, that have recently passed away. Now, first of all, obviously, it can't be from the human realm. There aren't that many. There aren't billions who are dying. There's only 7 billion in total. So billions of consciousnesses that have recently passed away from the animal realm, from the spirits, from all the other realms, billions of consciousnesses are all hovering around trying to get in. It sounds hilarious, doesn't it? It sounds ridiculous. It sounds hilarious. I love that, you know. Billions of them. And we got the human birth. We won the lottery, you know. So that little fetus, that sentient being, came to very powerfully when I was in bed with that boy. The karma ripened for that being and they ran like a magnet, if you like. Were driven, were attracted to my womb. So that being had karma with me. Strong history with me. Then when it was in London, it was during the 60s, they'd got free abortions on the medical system there. So I went to the hospital. There was no question. I didn't want a baby. I didn't think of it as a being. I didn't want the end result, a little baby in my life. That was clear, you know. Whatever the reasons, my own, whatever. So it was very clear. I wanted an abortion. So that means basically, from my point of view, I must have had the thought rose in my mind to kill the child. I didn't think of it as killing, of course. I said I have an abortion. But now from the side of the being in my womb, they have to have had the karma to be killed. Have to have. Because it wouldn't happen to them otherwise. So one of the karmic results of killing, if it's a complete action, it would be a lower realm suffering. Lower realm rebirth like a lion or something, or even other rebirths, which I can talk about. The second way killing would ripen would be as a tendency, like we're talking, the fishermen, all the humans who've got tendency to kill. The third way killing ripens is as an experience, which means you would get killed or you would die young. Look at the world. So this is fetuses. I would suggest if you did your surveys, and we don't do these kind of surveys, there are more human beings who get conceived in a womb, who die before they're born, than those who even get born. I think so. Miscarriages and abortions, there must be millions, you know. That's the karma of that sentient being due to having killed me. Karma is very personal. That the karma ripened and I aborted it. It's the karma of its own past action. So then its consciousness would again leave, it would die, and then it would take another rebirth. More karma will ripen for another type of rebirth, whatever kind it would be. All the time we're taking rebirth, all the time, depending on how we die, what karmic seed ripens.
So that embryo paid karma, in a way, and
Sorry?
So that embryo paid karma.
I didn't hear the words, so sorry.
That embryo, the fetus.
Yes, what happened?
By it being killed,
Yes.
it paid karma.
Well, it finished the karma, that particular karma
and then
finished.
it's going to be born again a human, probably.
No, not necessarily at all. Because in my case, it must have, I don't think abortions are very pleasant for that poor fetus. It's pulled out by forceps. This little body, 12 weeks old, with a consciousness in it, it's pulled out, ripped out of the womb with forceps, you know. And so in my case, they didn't take it out properly. I had to have another one, second scraping. They left half the body in. So that has to be quite painful. So I would suggest that that's not a very cool way to die for the fetus. Quite painful. So that means that mind can't be peaceful. Therefore, if you die with an unpeaceful mind, you're not going to get a decent human birth. So it's all kind of tragic, really. It's kind of suffering, isn't it? Yeah, isn't it? Do you understand my point? Yeah. Go on.
You refer to the quality of dying.
Oh,
You refer to the quality of dying. The quality?
Yeah, this is a really important point. To die really well with
I
peaceful
wonder,
mind.
Can I give you a scenario of an old man who suffers from a disease? He will naturally die in great pain, or he can kill himself and have much better quality of death.
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. So the key point for the Buddha, it's not a moralistic one. It's not anyone's going to judge it. It's a question of if the mind is peaceful. Because a peaceful mind is a mind that's also virtuous. Peaceful and virtuous come together. You can't help but have so virtuous means peaceful, compassionate, unfearful. So technically you could argue, if a person truly has a really peaceful mind and for compassionate reasons kills themselves, I think it would be very rare. Technically you can't argue it's not possible, but I think it'd be a bit surprising that they would die. The reason a person who's suffering would kill themselves is because they can't stand the pain. There's so much fear. That's not virtuous. That's just not virtuous in its nature. It's so much fear there. It's not criticizing anybody. It's just looking at it, quite painful. And that's why the Buddhist view, the most precious thing you can do for anybody in this life. Lama Zopa says in this book of his, which is coming out very soon, it'll actually be downloadable for free, as a PDF. It's very helpful. He said that if you're going to help anybody in this life, help them when they die. Because that's when you can help them with the right environment. You can make them peaceful. You can calm them down. If they're a Christian, you say nice Christian prayers. You can really... Because you know yourself, when we're suffering, we desperately want someone to rely upon, don't we? Want a friend to be close, to take care of us. So the most precious gift you can give old people, your old grandma, your old grandpa, look at the way people die. Like old vegetables, it's so tragic. Not knowing what their mind is doing, completely freaking out. It's so sad, to be able to help a person die well is the most precious gift. Even if they've got a lot of suffering. Because people often say, when I speak to hospice nurses and people, that the physical pain isn't the main thing, it's the mental anguish. It's the worst one. It's really tragic. Yes?
Would that not include then euthanasia?
I can't quite hear you, sweetheart.
Wouldn't that include then euthanasia?
Which part would include euthanasia?
So peaceful death.
But this is my point. How do you know they've got a peaceful mind? I mean, how can you guarantee that a person whom you're going to kill, euthanize, has got a peaceful mind? And how can you also see what karma they've got? You can't possibly know this unless you're a really highly realized being. It's an incredible risk to take, to kill somebody, without knowing all the... Huh?
My father just died
Yes,
2 years ago
I understand,
from
yeah.
cancer.
Yes,
And it was a big family debate.
Yes.
Do you let the medical profession keep him alive?
yes.
Or do you...
I understand. So, darling, listen, Melanie, the point is, it's not, I keep wanting to say this, it's not a moralistic of should or shouldn't. It's not a question of should or shouldn't in a moral sense. It's a practical issue of knowing all the conditions, and the Buddhist view would, of course, include here that the mind will take another rebirth. That wasn't probably what you brought into consideration in your family, was it? May I suggest? Because that wasn't your discussion, or was it? So that's fine. So from the materialist point of view, it's not a difficult situation. If you have the view that your darling daddy dies and disappears, then I think it's not a difficult conversation. But if we do take in this factor here, the Buddha's view, that your daddy's consciousness will continue, then I would suggest it's quite hard to know. We're not clairvoyant. We can't see his mind. We don't know the karma that's going to ripen. We don't know the kind of rebirth it's going to get. I mean, that's all. It's a practical issue, knowing all the facts, That's all. So that's up to each individual. I can't tell you to think a different way, but I'm just giving you the Buddhist view. You see my point? Yes.
So that would mean, if you sit with things that are dying, which I have done,
Yes.
it can be a very, very hard thing. It's good to be there.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah.
But I think you're really challenged because it can go on a long time.
It's true, sweetheart.
And it can be very hard.
Of course it can.
And which is why it's challenging for
Yeah,
anyone in
that's
that
right.
situation.
That's right, it is.
About what to do.
Absolutely.
You're not really equipped to do
No,
too much
it's
to
true.
really make it be physically bad.
Claire Marie, it's true. And this again is the suffering of life. We can't avoid this. We can see that death is part of life. Suffering, death's a part of life.
All right, so my question is that
Yeah.
it's basically you're going to be witness through the whole bitter end to create as much comfort and peace in that environment. That would be what we're advocating.
This is, this book that I've edited, and actually this is how Lama Zopa talks. It's like a hilarious title for the Western world. I'm calling it, Lama Zopa's words, How to Help Your Loved Ones Enjoy Death and go happily to their next rebirth. It's an embarrassing title for intellectuals, you know. So that's really the essence of it. So its first part of it's all like the Buddhist teachings about impermanence and suffering and attachment. Very, very tasty teachings. And there's a whole section on the death process itself, a detailed description of exactly what happens when. And then there's the actual advice of, first of all, the first section is all the things to help your loved one in the weeks and months before death. Then months and weeks. Then as the time goes by, what to help at the days before they die. Then what to do at the time they stop breathing. Then what to do the days after they stop breathing. And then what to do in the different scenarios. If they give their organs, what to do if they die at home, what to do if they die in hospital, what to do if they die suddenly, what to do. There's all these scenarios and it's step-by-step instructions and then all the practices at the back. There's a million things, but the essence of it is to create a really peaceful environment, a room, let's say. And this is so rare because, hospice, we've got a big hospice service, our organisation, a big hospice service in Brisbane. It helps anybody. It's not Buddhist, but a Buddhist nun runs it, but it's helping anybody. Palliative care, you know. And they help hundreds of people die well. The ones who die slowly, not drop dead in your soup, you know. The ones who die slowly. So, she said most people don't die at home. The ideal scenario is to die at home where you can have control over the situation, you know. But in hospitals, people are so kind, nurses and doctors, but everything's clanky and loud, and there are wards, and it is really. And there's all my friends who do help with dying, sit with them literally. Then as you die, your mind becomes, and this is the Buddhist view, but your mind becomes more subtle, and you become incredibly sensitive to the slightest disturbance, which can really freak the poor person out, you know. So the most crucial thing is to have a really peaceful environment, a room where it's beautiful. Everything, whatever's in that room is conducive for that person to die well. So let's say that classic scenario would be the Buddhists. They have Buddhist images, the statues, the Buddhist prayers, the Buddhist things, teachings. The people in that room should only be the ones who can help that person be peaceful. Keep the animals out, keep their pets out, keep things that they're attached to. Because attachment's like this vampire, especially when you're dying, because who wants to die? We just want to cling on to the status quo. And when a strong attachment's there, it completely freaks the mind out. Because it makes the mind so distressed. So if the person is around them, it makes them feel calm, virtuous. Like if they're a Christian, you'd talk all about heaven to them. You'd calm them down. You'd say what a good person you are. You'd love them. You'd literally calm them down. We're all neurotic all the time. Can you imagine if death was so neurotic? And you remember all the bad things you've done, and you're anxious and you're worried, you know. So to be there to make the person peaceful, praise them, what a good person you are, how kind you are. I mean, it's like nectar for their little hearts, you know. And then tell them about heaven. I mean, talk to them, whatever the person's view is, you know, to make them peaceful and calm. Buddhists, you'd have prayers on. You'd do their practices for them. Whatever goes on in that room would be for the person's sake. This is their gig, you know. This is their show. Everything that goes on will be just for their sake. You keep noisy people out, even if they're unconscious. I mean, there's so much discussion. You know, the Buddhist view is, even when you stop breathing, your mind hasn't gone yet. Your subtle consciousness is there. So when you go into a coma, your subtle consciousness is there, and you can be vividly aware. There's so many interesting reports now. People who are, have near-death experiences. You know, their mind leaves the body while they're having an operation. So this is really fitting with the Buddhist view, and it's very common that you can drug a person and make them look peaceful, but their mind can be like in torment, having like dreams, hallucinations. I know when I was really sick one time and nearly dying. Your mind's like you're living in this war zone, you know, but you're completely unconscious, but you're having all these vivid, nightmarish dreams. The Buddhist would be, you can't medicate mental anguish, you can medicate physical. But then you give all the drugs and the person comes back again, you know, they're still tortured. So it's the crucial one is, even if there is physical pain, lessen it if you can, but to help the mind be peaceful. This is a miraculous gift. And the logical reason for the Buddhists is because when you die, and this process that occurs, before you stop breathing, like I said, the karmic seed that will trigger your next life is beginning to activate. And if you're panic-stricken and fearful, it can only be a negative one. If you're peaceful and virtuous, it can only be a positive one. So it's like a big storm you have to navigate, you know? And that's why it's like a practical issue, because of next birth mostly. For ordinary materialists, this does not occur. You don't think of the next rebirth, you know? But this is the reason why death is so important for the Buddhists, because your mind will continue. And it's like a minefield you've got to work yourself way through. So at least have them virtuous and peaceful and help them be calm. And this is the best way you can possibly help. Your old grandma, your grandpa. I mean, Melanie, I'm not criticising. You understand my point here. I'm just giving the Buddhist explanation. The practical reason why. As much as you can, make it conducive, you know. for peace and virtues. That's miraculous. Then people, and there are many, many examples of people who die blissfully, with sweetness and happy minds and virtuous, you know. We can see. People who are nurses and doctors, I'm sure, see this. Are we communicating clear, Maria? Just thoughts, just points of view. Vasilis, what's your point?
Just to light a little bit the subject, not talking about...
What, sweetheart?
Light up a little bit the subject, talking about death so much, I mean, maybe change a little bit the subject.
You want to change the subject?
Yeah.
Why?
Talk about karma. Go back
to karma. Good.
Yeah.
Go.
There was a joke around in internet that says that I can go around and do bad things all day and feeling good because I don't feel responsible. It's the bad karma of the other people. So what I'm saying about if it's not a lion that has the doing something bad and the antelope is the one that has a bad karma eaten by the lion.
But the lion has bad karma.
So killing you, it's not like I do something bad, but somebody has to kill you in order to complete your
I'm lost.
bad karma.
Vasily, I'm completely lost. Your clever mind is leaving me behind. What is your scenario here and what is the question?
Okay, the scenario is, let's say that I'm doing something bad to you, but it's not like something that I'm doing, but somebody has to do.
No, stop. That's already mistaken. The only reason you do something bad is because you have the tendency to do it. Therefore, you're continuing.
No, because somebody has to do something bad to you,
sweetheart,
because you have done something bad and you have to pay your karma.
And then next life you'll have it done to you. So what's the difference? You do something negative now. There are various ways. Any action, virtuous or non-virtuous, will ripen. You will continue to do that action, and you will have that action done to you. This is simply how karma ripens. Virtue as well. Every time you're kind to me because I'm being kind to you. And the result of kindness, your kindness, is you will continue to be kind, and I will be kind back to you. This is simple karma, the simple law. So you both have to play the role.
I have been kind to people, but they don't kind to me.
That's right, but it's past life I'm talking, sweetheart. So if you harm me, it's because I've harmed you before. And if you continue to harm me, you're going to get harmed right back, sweetheart. You can't avoid it. Of course there's karma there. The lion is creating negative karma every millisecond. She's killing.
In this logic, when I'm doing something bad, it will come back to me?
Of course.
Is that correct?
Of course.
So somebody else has to do something bad in order for me to get paid my bad karma.
Darling, you get too complicated, Vasily. Start again, please. Start again, darling.
It doesn't go round.
Sweetheart, listen. Just put it this way, Vasily. You'll work it out yourself. Every millisecond of every sentient being is doing something, thinking something, saying something.
But this is
Vasily!
To respond to somebody
God
else.
Almighty, can you just listen to me and you'll put it through. You can conclude it yourself if I give you this principle. Every millisecond, you, Vasilis, have one, a tendency to keep doing something because you've done it before. Two, you have the experience similar to the cause, which is people do things to you. Have you noticed in this life, people do good things and bad things to you? Have you noticed that? And have you noticed in your mind, you do good things and bad things? Pick really simply. So you have a tendency to do good things and bad things, yeah? You also have the karma to have people do good things to you and to do bad things to you.
Right.
And three, you have the environmental results. You know, food is tasty, food is ugly, it's cold, it's this. So this is every millisecond, every sentient being. And because we're social beings, we are continually meeting and doing it back to each other. So think that through. If every sentient being is doing negative things and positive, and I'm in a relationship with you, and that includes me, then I do things to you, and you do things to me. So it keeps happening. It goes around in circles until we cut it, until we change it, until we break it, and stop doing negative things. Then it stops happening to you, as well as you will stop doing them. It's not surprising. Yes.
I have a question about those non-material sentient beings.
Which are they? Oh, you mean, oh yes, there's billions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of these.
Really?
The Buddha would say, yeah. Okay, I'll tell you about this. This is a very interesting discussion, you guys. It very rarely goes this deep into karma on the first afternoon, but there you go. And to have something about you people is just going in this direction. It's most fascinating. Very fascinating, actually. Okay, Buddha's view of the universe. There are countless, literally trillions of sentient beings. In fact, they've got this saying. They'd say there's not an atom of space you won't find sentient beings. So if we take this view that the physical world is made of the four elements, and according to the more esoteric Buddhist teachings in Buddhist Tantra, which is the same model that the Tibetan medical system uses, which is very similar to the Hindu teachings about yoga, all this business. It's a very similar type of viewpoint. A bit similar to the Chinese one of the subtler energies and all this business, you know. The Buddhist view would basically say the physical world is made of the 4 elements. That's it. And then there are minds. And that's all the universe consists of. Physical elements and minds. So all minds, they use a term in Buddhism often, mind stream, this river of mental moments. All minds have their own set, are linked to their own set of the 4 elements. So when you, I forget your name again, I'm sorry. Hava. When Hava dies, the gross consciousness and her gross sensory and conceptual mind will gradually cease. The 4 elements will cease, and by the time she stops breathing, the grosser level of Hava has ceased. But then you go to subtle consciousness, and there's all this detailed description of the more subtle process, the subtle physical energies, the subtle prana, all this highly complex. And this, again, like I said, it's the Tibetan medical system uses this model. And then you keep going ever more subtle, deconstructing, until you eventually get to the subtlest level of your energy, which is called very subtle consciousness, which is inextricably linked to the very subtle wind energy, which is the building blocks of the other 4 elements. I mean, this is the model that, you know, medieval science used. Now we talk about 4 million other elements, you know, the 4 elements. So then your consciousness is inextricably linked with your set of the 4 elements. So then due to karma, how you die, let's say in the past life, virtuous karma ripened, your consciousness is programmed with all the tendencies, your experiences, the environmental, the type of birth, your mummy, your daddy, all your life was all programmed already before you even died. Then when your consciousness left that body, it eventually found its way, with its very subtle wind energy, into the new mummy's human womb, and then, like instead of the lion or the dog, it conjoined with human elements, and so off you go, your physical elements, and all the different elements are manifesting. So then, karmically even, the physical elements out there, they're not, you know, the scientific world talks about the laws of the physical world. Yes, there are laws, of course there are, but the Christians would say it's God made it. The materialists would say it is just the physical elements, but the Buddha would say even the way the elements manifest for us sentient beings over eons of time is due to karma as well. Because Lama Zopa said there's one text in the more advanced teachings called the Kala Chakra teachings, where there are in the Tantra these detailed descriptions of the intimate relationship between internal and external energy. Internal means mind, what the mind does, and external means the 4 elements. So then let's say your mind being negative, this will pollute your wind energies, which is what's called sickness. And then over lifetimes, this then impacts upon the external elements, which causes you to get born where it's polluted, it's ugly, it's a war zone. It's all due to the collective as well as individual karma of sentient beings. So there's no superior being up there running the show. It's not just merely physical. It's even the physical environments. The 4 elements are due to the elements. So we've got trillions of sentient beings. Then we have the different types. They're all mental states. So this within samsara, as they call it, they're the desire realm. They call it like a realm of attachment. Attachment runs the show in all of these different rebirths. So sort of like the top suburbs of this samsaric sets of rebirths is what they call the God realms, which is very similar to what the Christians call heaven, the Muslims call paradise. Again, I've got Jews. What do Jews call it, please? Is any Jew, please tell me if you go to heaven? I really want to know.
You
have heaven.
The world beyond.
The Jew, yeah.
You have heaven.
For the Jews, you live now just for heaven.
Okay, good. Same as okay, good. Now, fine. I have a definitive answer. You're the first person. Thank you. So there's this experience. You know how they describe heaven, isn't it? Radiant and blissful and light bodies and all this. Yeah. Well, that would exactly how Buddha would agree. When the mind is super virtuous, virtue. We can see the benefit of virtue. You're happy. You're blissful. You're clear. There's no fear and drama. You know. So virtue purifies your elements. So when you die and you've got masses of virtue, one of your rebirths could be to be born as a God being with subtle light body. Your physical elements are literally subtle light. So your mind is super, super blissful, super radiant, super joyful. So the Buddha would suggest that's not the end though. It's just still in samsara. Then a bit down the scale, very well down, you've also got a human birth, which is, a bag of bones. Look at this. But still, they often would say it's a better rebirth to get if you want to practice a spiritual path. Because if you're in the God realms, you're so blissed out thinking you've now made it, but you still haven't finished the job. And that karma will run out, and you'll get miserable lives again, because you haven't finished. So then the human, for sure, at least we can see it's not so cool, and we can use it to practice, which is why it's a very good one. Then further down the scale, you've got the rebirths that are mainly due to negative karma ripening. The least suffering of those is called the animals, and we can see how many of them, all the billions of creatures and the fishes and the tiny little bugs, they're all in the animal realm. And this is the predominance of the three main delusions in Buddhist psychology. This root ignorance, which gives rise to incredible, kind of deluded, narrow, fearful mind. There's attachment, and then there's aversion. So the animal realm is a predominance of ignorance, which brings incredible ego grasping, incredible fear, incredible attachment, incredible kind of just following the instincts, you know. And look at poor suffering animals. They just talk about survival. You know, they're just living in rampant fear and paranoia, killing and being killed. It's like a nightmare, you know. Then you've got the spirits, trillions more of them, disembodied beings. You could argue their minds are conjoined with the air energy, and they're flipped from pillar to post, driven by the most intense grasping. Unbelievably more powerful attachment than we would ever know. Deeply, profoundly propelled by grasping. Some can be very powerful, some are very harmful, some are just hungry ghosts, they call them. Many humans have some karma with ghosts. They get, you know, people who hear voices. You know, if you and I have a really heavy relationship, really attachment, heavy and violent, and I die, I could easily possess you as some heavy being and harm you, you know, because my attachment to you, I will literally kind of invade your body. So the common one among Buddhists, the view is that many beings, ghosts, animals can be possessed by them, you know, many, they can do so much harm, so much suffering, so much suffering. Then you've got the hells, the most occupied of all.
What?
Hell beings, hell realms.
Okay.
See, what I find fascinating, you know, is I really have, over the years, I've had such respect for anybody who looks into this stuff. I don't want to criticise other religions or other views or even scientific views. At least a serious human being is trying to understand the nature of the universe, isn't it? I have great respect, you know. So I'm not afraid of understanding about hell or talking about it. It might be a load of rubbish, or it might be true. Why be afraid of it? You understand? And I like to understand the logic of it. So the Buddha's got this understanding. So those beings, you could argue their minds are conjoined with a fire element, you know. When you hear the descriptions, like of Dante, and all the different descriptions in religions of hell, it's how they talk. So these four elements idea really makes sense, you know, the mind conjoined with these different elements. And then due to these different rebirths, you have, the way they talk about it, they say you have different kind of karmic appearances. Things appear to you in a certain way. So we know ourselves, a person could be in this room who's really paranoid, got deeply suffering mind, who sees worms coming out of your eyes, you know, I mean, it's like they're visions, but Buddha would say everything we see is like vision that we have created. So if we've got a lot of virtue ripening in our life, we're going to have, like Clea Maria's point, you're born with a tendency to not harm, you see good everywhere, you have compassion. We can see people like this. They don't seem to have, I mean, even if they have bad things happen to them, they've got an open, peaceful mind. Some people, no matter how rich and beautiful and famous they are, their minds are distorted, they go mad, they're just so tortured, you know. We can see all these different things. So every tendency we have, all your experiences, the physical world, the way it impacts upon you, other people, what they do to you and don't do to you, all of this, main cause, my own past actions, mentally and then verbally and physically. So almost like you're saying, Buddha says, each of us, the hell beings, the spirits, the gods, humans, we are the creators of our own experiences. You understand? Rather than being sent there by somebody. That's the dualistic view. You know? That's the dualistic view. And again, I'm not criticising you if you have that view, but that's not the Buddha's view. One of my lamas, hang on a sec, one of my lamas said, hell is in some place where the devil is waiting, saying, ha ha, I'm waiting for Lama Yeshe. Hell is the manifestation of the negative energy of that suffering sentient being. It's very interesting. Yes, Clea. You speak on me.
Prem asked you at the beginning about this, your nature, that you carry the seeds, and that you have this tendency toward being a certain way. And then now you said a very important thing, that we create our
we create this is what karma means. We are the creators of our actions, our experiences, our tendencies, our environments, everything. We are the creators of it by our past actions.
So we're always implicated. I mean, his joke that he presented where you're responding, and you're always implicated in everything.
That's exactly right,
and it's all interlinked.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely.
So when we're creating, sometimes the conditions, we land in Alaska,
That's right.
she had mentioned.
That's right.
And then we are faced with perhaps encountering you when you
That's
visit Alaska and rethinking how we are and deciding we don't want to be smashing the seal in the head.
That's right.
We're going to go do something else.
That's right.
That's the transformative act.
That's the one.
Where you create.
Yes. That's the one. That's the one. And that's where, and for example, about 14, 15 years I worked with people in prison. Back in 96, when I was based in the States, editing our Buddhist magazine, I got a letter from this young Mexican-American guy called Arturo. He was 18. He told me he was in one of these top security prisons in California where they're in their cell 23 hours a day, you know. And it's like, anyway, he told me he'd been gang since he was 11, prison since he was 12, and now got 3 life sentences. He's now like 38. You know, he went for his very first parole hearing after, you know, whatever it is, 17 years in prison already, whatever. Anyway, the point is, over the years I ran this non-profit. We had, you know, over the years I'd say, someone else runs it now, but I had like 9 full-time staff at some point, paying salaries. We had 1,000 letters a month from prisons. We sent hundreds of thousands of books. I'd go visit prisons all over the world, take their phone calls. And I mean, it was an interesting, amazing experience for me because as people, you know, I haven't been to prisons. We're suddenly meeting, and of course, it's, you know, all the bloody laws, the street laws, isn't it? They're the ones, not the rich Wall Street guys aren't in prison, it's the working class guys who sell $100 or steal a video. Oh, yeah, indeed, they kill and murder, plenty of psychos in prison. But what was so fascinating was we started to get all these letters, you know, and that was the thing. At some point, we're getting 1,000 letters a month. So it was an incredibly moving experience for me over the years, meeting these people. And as they would often say, that, you know, the ones who wrote, who wanted books, who wanted to change themselves, for whom this condition, as they all said, like their mantra, this has been my wake-up call. So many of them would never have thought of virtue and goodness, follow your condition. You're born as a Mexican boy in Los Angeles, you know, you follow what's there. He only knew gangs. That's all he knew, even though his heart was good. He never killed anybody. His heart was very good, but you do what's around you, and the pressure of gangs is so gigantic, you know. I mean, the rules of gangs, he told me, so heavy, these Mexican gangs, is that if you don't, you know, like this unspoken, they have these unspoken rules, they're all there, that if you don't respond strongly to a person who offends you, because the worst insult to be a gangster is somebody disrespects you. And if you don't respond with violence, you will be turned against by your own gang. So the pressure is so phenomenal. So there he is following the rules of the gang, and he's 16, finally gets 3 life sentences after being in juvenile prison. And then he's doing the gang thing in the prisons, because that's what you do. The prisons, I mean, it's hilarious. This is kind of hilarious. It's not hilarious if it weren't tragic, you know. In the California prisons, in the streets of Los Angeles, you've got thousands of gangs. Every block is another gang, with their own rules, their names, their brothers. They give their life for each other. But let's say you're in one gang down the next neighbourhood, and then we both get arrested. Then we go to prison, and we immediately overnight we become part of the Southerners gang, which is all the boys from Los Angeles. And our worst enemy now will be the Northerners from San Francisco, the Mexicans. So overnight, you and I were blood enemies one day, and now we're blood brothers the next. Right there, you know. It's hilarious. So then we would give our life for each other in prison. Because all the gangs, there are 2 Mexican gangs in the California prisons, there are 2 black gangs, and there are 2 white supremacist gangs. That's it. And so the northern Mexicans from northern California hate the white supremacists, hate the blacks, and the southern Californians hate the northerners even more than they hate everybody. So when they have their wars, the southern Californians team up against the northern Californians. I mean, it's like a joke, you know. I could tell you amazing stories about these insane gangs. So there's these people, talk about environmental pressure, talk about bashing baby seals to death. The pressure of gangs is stupendous. So to get out of that mindset, you've got to be pretty brave, you know. So what I found was many of the Mexicans, they're really little beating, good hearts. As soon as you put them out of that situation, then the reason he's in cell 23 hours a day and he's intelligent, they're studying history and they're taking what books they can from the library, and then one day he gets a Buddhist book and he wrote, and our name was in it, so he wrote to us. And that's how the whole prison project started. And I'd say over 14 years I ran it, I had letters from 25,000 people, you know. We had a whole system, we sent books, and then one book we read by 100 people. It was incredible. I don't want to make people Buddhists, but the whole point was to help them see their minds, you know. And so the people in prison, I mean, I've got friends on death row. There's a guy in Kentucky, Mitch, who's nearly ready for his death date, you know. It takes about 30 years to do these appeals. And he, like a lot of people, had a gun. He was dealing in drugs. His friend Leaf, who's in prison with him. And when you have guns and drugs, I'm sorry, people die, you know. You don't have to be psycho to be in prison. You don't have to be psycho to be on death row. Guns happen, people die, you know. So Mitch, this good man, spent his life, he's taken care of his grandpa and his grandma and his mummy and his auntie and his grandchildren. He writes things, makes things in his death row, and he's getting ready for his death date. He's a really devoted Buddhist, you know, working on his mind, accepting his reality. And he said, I'm ready for that electric jolt, Robina, you know. So what I'm saying is, conditions are so powerful. The mind is the point. But if you're brought up in a condition where there's certain pressure, baby seal killing or gangsters, and then you've got this one I mentioned before, where all you're trying to do is please the people around you, because that's how you get praise. We are very attached to what people think of us. This is our deepest attachment, more than sex and power and drugs. It's so primordial in us. So if you're living with this wish to be of course you're going to behave according to your, you know, it's very scary to go against your environment, isn't it? To do what mummy did, not to do what mummy said or God said. So often to get out of our environment can be the best thing, you know. You know, just talking away here. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, right. So these prisoners, I have such respect, these guys, you know, and this is the interesting point too. I'm not trying to make them all holy, they're not, but I mean the ones who because when you're in prison, you can't change anything. You really are not, you're not free, it's a fact. But what's so amazing, when you know you can't change anything else, you either go mad or you change your mind. And this is why many of the prisoners I know Buddhism suited their practice, suited them perfectly, because it really gives them these skills. I'm not saying Buddhism is the only one. It gives them ability to take responsibility, to own their own mind, to let go of attachment to their environment, knowing they won't get out of prison alive, knowing they're going to go to death row, they'll die eventually, like the rest of us. So they got no choice. They changed their minds. And I always use this amazing example. I read about this woman. I think we went past tea time. Is it okay? Okay. So this woman, I remember reading about her. I didn't meet her. This is maybe 30 years ago, this woman. I read about her more recently. She's in Florida. She's a nice little hippie lady with a hippie husband and 3 hippie kids. Hitching. They get 2 guys pick them up. The coppers pick up the 2 guys, stop the 2 guys. The guys kill the coppers and blame the hippies. So they're on death row. Can you even conceive of it? The husband gets executed. Can you imagine the torture of this, you know? And she lost the kids, all this. She eventually got out after 17 years. One of the murderers confessed, you know, like a miracle. So she, though, was an amazing woman. She wrote a biography. And it sounds so cute to say what I'm about to say, but if you can only imagine the torture and suffering she would have gone through to come to this conclusion. She said, finally, you know, exhaustively, I realised I couldn't change anything, but they couldn't take my mind from me. So I decided, I'm not a prisoner, I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell, I'm in a cave. But that is so courageous, you know. I can't even believe, look at our lives, like a miracle in comparison. But, you know, it's like we feel so paralysed by our conditions sometimes. We don't think we can change even our mind, you know. I mean, this is what I found with the people I really admire in prison, who these garbage dump conditions, garbage, treated like animals, you know. Especially the States, with respect. They say that, in The Economist, I remember reading a few years ago, an article that said that they got the United States. I'm allowed to criticise, so I've got an American passport as well, you see, so it's okay. Australian passport too. And English, so I can criticise them all, because it's my home. Anyway, the point is, the Economist says that the United States has 5% of the world population. They have 25% of the prison population, meaning a quarter of all humans on earth who live in prison live in the United States. And I read more recently they've got 50% of all lawyers.
Say the last thing again?
50% of all lawyers.
Oh, we have them
Yes,
also in the US.
50%, yeah. Anyway, whatever the reasons, doesn't matter, whatever